What's up, everybody? This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. We are here for number 3, the third live stream in a row today. And I have Robert Lindsy Milne with me today. And we are going to be talking about intuitive counseling, and I believe he's a psychic as well, which is I'm really interested in this one because it's the first time I've talked to somebody who is an intuitive like this on my show, so definitely interested in hearing what he's got to say. But first, if you want to catch me in some speaking gigs on Saturday, May 22nd, if you take a look and let me get the banner here, maybe I'll get it right this time. Third time's a charm, right? We got this speaker summit, and that is this Saturday coming up on the 22nd. You can catch me there talking about turning your mess into your message through podcasting. The next one that I'm going to be doing is on June 5th and 6th, and that is the Back from Broken Virtual Summit. And there's about 30 speakers that are lined up there, keynote speakers. I'm one of them as well. I'm also doing the back end technical stuff for this event, so I'm going to be, double dipping there, and that's going to be a really good one too as well. So that's a free event, and so I think we've got 250 slots available, and there's plenty of room left right now. So if you want to go and join this event, go to the website right there, the backfrombrokensummit.com, and you can go and get your ticket. And I'd appreciate it, the support. If you're watching me and you like, what I'm doing and enjoy the content that I'm creating for you and putting out there, I would love to see you there at the summit, and maybe we can talk and get to know each other a little bit there as well. What else? If you're a business, if you're a coach, if you have a book, if you have an online business, if you have anything that products or services that you want to promote, definitely reach out to me. And I have a bunch of different tiers for supporting the podcast and being able to hook you up, with whatever it is. If you have, a book, you can put it on this side right here, just like this. There's other ways you can do the mid roll. You can do the front, the back, any kind of organic mentions and stuff like that. So just feel free to reach out to me, nowhere to go but up now at gmail.com, and I can show you the pricing and tiers for all of that stuff. So let's get to the show. Let me give you a couple of messages here with the intro, and I'll be right back.
Sean Dustin spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. Upon release in 2006, he had nothing but the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and legal paperwork. In 2010, he kicked a long-time methamphetamine habit and started the long climb back up the ladder of life. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. If you want transparency and authenticity, you're in the right place. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and this is Sean Dustin.
What's up, Robert?
Hey, I'm ready.
All right. Yeah, I apologize, everybody. I apologize. I forgot to apologize during the announcement for being late, but we ran into some technical difficulties, but we got them ironed out, and here we are.
Here we are.
So awesome, man. Why don't you, like I said, you're a psychic, and like I have no...
And I've been a psychic now. It's 56 years. I started to work at a tea room in Toronto. I was 15 and a half years old, and it's how I got off the street. And before that time, I had always been sensitive. From the time I was a child, I started seeing and sensing things around people. One of my first memories of that, I was about 5 or 6 years old. I came home from school for lunch, and I said to my mother, Grandma Harris died today. And my mother got very upset. Grandma Harris was my great-grandmother, and I'd only seen her once in my life. And she lived overseas. And this would have been about 1955, 1956. So, news traveled very slow then. So my mother gets really upset. She yells at me, probably hit me for saying bad things. Next night at dinner, my sister and I, my mom, my father, they're talking. My mother says, Grandma Harris died yesterday. And I thought my dad was going to get angry with my mom and hit her or do something for saying bad things. And to my astonishment, they talked about it. And I thought, hey, I talked about that yesterday. That's one of my first memories of seeing something, talking about it, getting punished, and then finding out later that the people were talking about it afterwards. Me. So it used to drive me crazy. Uncle Harold, that wasn't Aunt Sally you were with. Who was that? Well, that one did get me hit. I remember that one. So, but I didn't know that he should have been with Aunt Sally and not the other person. I didn't know. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and in my era, every kid wanted to play in the NHL, and every kid in Toronto or most of Canada wanted to play for the Leafs, and I certainly was encouraged by my father. He took me to a Stanley Cup game. I was 9 years old at Maple Leaf Gardens, and it was between Boston and Toronto. It was a first round. We only had 6 teams, so it was in those days. And it was the first round, Boston and Toronto. The series tied 1-1. The game's in Toronto, and the game I was at was tied 1-1 at the end of the third period. And when the team comes on the ice for the first overtime period, I became drawn to number 17 with Toronto Maple Leafs. Guy's name was Gary Eamon. And while they were just stretching to get ready for the overtime period, I knew he was going to score. It wasn't that I sensed it in my mind. He was going to, and it was real and it was going to happen. But the game hadn't started. So anyway, the referee blows his whistle. Teams go to the bench. Eamon's not on the first line. He's on the bench. The lights get turned down in Maple Leaf Gardens. 18,000 people. The building gets all silent. The referee just drops, ready to drop the puck. And I couldn't hold it in anymore because in my mind, Gary Eamon had scored. And I jumped up in the silent arena, and I started to yell and scream. And everybody in the arena turned around, looked at me and my dad. And my dad put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Sit down." And I did. And I looked, anyway, the referee drops the puck, the game starts. And I looked around the building and I realized that nobody knew he was going to score. Not even Eamon. He wasn't even on the ice. Anyway, a couple of minutes later, Eamon jumps over the boards. A guy named Red Kelly passes the puck to him. Eamon tips it in the net. Toronto wins the game in overtime. And the entire building erupted. And cameras are going off and people are yelling and screaming. And I just looked around the building and thought, other people think differently than me. I went, oh, that's why. And that was when I knew what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. I didn't know exactly, but I knew I was going to be using that sense. When I was 14 and a half, I ran away from home and I lived in downtown Toronto in the streets. I lived in an alleyway in the wintertime that year. And I survived on the street using my intuition, my instinct, psychic abilities. And I survived pretty well. most of the time when I was in trouble, when I was on the street, and 14-year-old kids can get into trouble easily and quickly, I always had options. I was always had the option of being able to use my intuition or psychic ability to solve a problem, or an immoral or illegal way. Most of the time, not every time, but most of the time I relied on my intuition. My psychic ability was how I survived. There were a couple of occasions where I had to do an immoral act to get off the street in a snowstorm or something like that. So in those times, there was no right or wrong answer as to what I should have done. But my life unfolded depending upon the choices that I made, and it led me in certain directions. In the springtime of that year, the police caught me and brought me home, and I spent a little bit more time at home. And then when I was 15, I climbed out the window again, and I never returned home to live full time. And again, I went back down to the street, and I heard that if you could do readings at a tea room called the Cosy Tea Room, and this was like a big deal in Toronto in those days. This was the place. If you worked at the Cosy Tea Room, if you worked in the afternoon, you would get a sandwich, a cup of tea, and some cookies, and you get paid at the end of the shift for doing tea leaf readings. And if you worked in the evening, you'd get a hot dinner, again, cookies and tea, and again paid. And I applied there. I went there to do readings. I applied. I had never done a tea leaf reading in my life. I had no idea what to do. And when I went for my interview, or the interview, I do a reading for me, kid. It was Mrs. Cox was the owner, and I just picked up the teacup. I didn't know what it was, and I put my hands out like this, right? Put my hands up like this, held the teacup, looked in the teacup, and then I looked at her, and I just talked the way I normally would. I just tuned into her like that, and I had no idea what the tea leaves said. And she hired me. And that day, I started to work at the team. I was 15 and a half. And I worked the afternoon shift and the evening shift. So I got 2 meals. I got a hot dinner for sure. I got paid. That night, I had a place to sleep. And the next day, I had a job to go to. And I worked at the Cosy Tea Room from the time I was about 15 and a half up to about 21. And in that time period, I worked 6 days a week, 5 days a week, 7 days a week, from morning till night. And some days I would see 10 people. Some days I would see 30 or 40. We would just go until all the clients had been read. And I did that till I was about 21. And by the time I was around 21, I had done thousands of sessions. And that's how I learned how to be psychic. I never used the tea leaves. I never used cards. I had to put them down on the table, but I just simply look at the people, and I would tune in, and I would do their reading, and that's how I started.
So is this something that you have to have somebody present in front of you, or like real time, face to face, or have touched something that they've touched to be able to tune into them? Or is this something
that's a really good question? At this point in my life, and I'm glad we're flipping through it, because we can talk forever about the wonderful times I had learning to be psychic. Over the years, I found now as a professional, I was the first Canadian psychic to be on radio shows or TV shows. I was the first traveling Canadian psychic. And by the time I was at about 28, I'd been around the world, everywhere actually, but Australia, appearing on radio and TV shows and performing. Over the time, I discovered that I could create a mental link with somebody, and I may not even speak with them. I can just know where they are and create that mental link. Now, they would have to give me their permission. About 4 years ago, one of my long-term clients, and I can tell you her name because a book's written about this. Stephanie Strathdee is a professor of epidemiology at Southern California University, and she's also associate dean. She's been a client of mine for about 30 years, and the first reading I did for her was when she just completed her doctorate. So she's been a regular client. She's married to a man named Tom Patterson, and Tom also is a professor, and Tom also is associate dean of the department he is in. They went away on their dream vacation. Tom's a big guy, and I describe him as like a real life Indiana Jones. They go away on this dream vacation, and as Tom got older, he blew up really big. He got over 300 pounds. Anyway, Tom gets on their trip in Egypt, and he catches the most potent super virus on the planet, the superbug, and it was 100% antibiotic resistant, which meant you get it, you die. Stephanie contacted me, and Tom was in a coma, and I made and had a mental link with Tom. And during that time period, I knew what was going on with him. I knew when he was getting into trouble. I knew when he was giving up. I knew when his vital signs changed. I could sense it and feel it. Every day, I'd have a meeting with Stephanie, and we'd talk about Tom's progress. During that time, I told Stephanie that she could find a cure for this. And now I have to tell you that I'm not the star of this show, the story I'm telling you. I'm a sideline. Had I not been doing my job, Tom wouldn't have lived, but I'm not the star. Like, there were so many others. So Stephanie decided that instead of letting her husband die, she was going to go out and find a cure. And during a short amount of time, she found a treatment, 3 different ones, and I helped her choose which one that would work, and it saved her husband's life. So to make a long story short, I knew when Tom was in trouble, and an example, he was medevac to Germany. He was in a coma, and he didn't know where he was. He didn't know what was going on. He was cold. He was sick. He was alone, and everybody around him was wearing a hazmat suit. And he was literally letting go. I felt him letting go and drifting away. And I realized that what Tom needed was his family or someone near him. And I told Stephanie that day. Oh, and by the way, I also knew how I knew that Tom was going to live was I saw his energy like a candlelight. And when he went, that was his life force. And when that candlelight flickered, he was in trouble. When the flame was strong, I knew he was okay. And that's how come I knew he was letting go, because the candle was looked like it was going out. And I said to Stephanie, Tom needs his children around him. Yesterday would have been a good day. Today's okay. Tomorrow, I don't know. If you wait any longer, don't bother. That night, the girls showed up in Germany, and that night, and Tom's vital signs came back. In the book, it's called The Perfect Predator, Tom writes, while he was in a coma, letting go, and ready to give up the ghost, as it were, to die, all of a sudden his daughters appeared, and it pulled them back. And he talks about that in the book. And throughout my part in the book, he talks about Strathdee talked about how I was a little bit ahead of the doctors in what I was sensing and feeling. I gave no medical advice, by the way. I just knew where Tom was at. So the answer to that question is yes, I can. And also, I just finished a connection with a woman who had 4th stage cancer. And I was her coach and psychic guide during the last 14 months as she completed her life just last month. And I knew how she was. I knew what was going on with her. When she was having panics, I could help her calm down. So, and I went through that. I lived that through 24/7 as well. So yes, I can do that.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
So we went from me learning how to do tea leaf readings to be doing some of the most profound work of my career.
Well, that's kind of like my personality. We just sort of jump around.
Like it, man. That's great. Some more questions, though. Don't let me just take over here.
Oh no, not at all. So we're gonna get to a comment here. This is from Ashton.
I would, however, prefer not to do readings right now, simply because I got to get really psyched up. I start doing readings, I'm not going to be doing anything else.
Yeah, no, this isn't a reading. This is just comments. If anybody would be getting a reading, I'd say give me one.
Okay, yeah, well, we can do that after. So should this should be interesting? I swear I have psychic ability. Well, of course you do. But not sure if I am able. Oh, maybe ask how you would know if you are. Well, okay, yes, I do. So almost all mammals. So not just humans, but mammals. So all those that are in this type of being, we all have an instinct, a sensitivity, an intuition. We all have it. So actually, that's not 100% true. If we took everybody on the planet, there's one guy at the far end that's got absolutely zero talent, and then there's another guy at the other end that's got 100% talent, and then the rest of us fit in between. So just about everybody has this instinct. So have you ever been sitting in a restaurant sometime and all of a sudden you look up and there's been somebody looking at you? You just look, right? Hey, or when you were in the slammer, where all of a sudden you could look up and you just got a vibe. Well, everybody has that sense. Or have you ever thought of a friend you hadn't talked to for a while, then the phone rings and there's your friend. Now, we all have that awareness. Now, being psychic isn't being spiritual. It's a whole different part of our brain. So there's a lot of psychic people that aren't spiritual at all, or positive spiritually are spiritual at all. And so it's an instinct. It's what we all have, and we all start off with it. For some reason, I kept hold of that instinct for me. Other people, as their analytical brain, their upper brain starts to develop, they override their instinct or their intuition. That's actually what happens. I used to teach a seminar, one-day class on how to be psychic. And, I taught that group. There were up to 300 was the biggest and 10 was the smallest, and then everywhere in between. I did it for over 20 years. One day I would take a group of strangers, people that had had very little contact with being psychic or any of that stuff. And I take a group of people in a room, and within 2 hours, I would have them sitting across one another, facing each other, face to face, doing psychic reading for a stranger. And I guaranteed it. And if you couldn't do it by the end of the day, I'll give you back your money, because it's a basic instinct we all have. And then we practice it, use it, develop it. We just get better and better at it. So in my lifetime, last January, I celebrated 56 years of doing this full time, my job. I've done more than 100,000 psychic connections. And when I was around 21, I realized that this was what I would do. I made a vow, and I had heard that when a young man became a priest, he made a vow to say a mass every day of his life. I made a vow that I would practice or do a psychic reading every day of my life. I made that vow. And I made it through 30 years before I missed a day, either a practice or actually doing a reading. So what I've done is taken an instinct that everybody has, and I've taken it to an extreme. So if you see a bodybuilder, so the man or woman, they've taken their body, that's a normal body, and they take it, and with concentration, they take it to extreme. That's what I've done with intuition, psychic ability, etc. That's how I've done it.
So you've basically put it on steroids.
That's exactly what happened. Well, what I did is I made it my way of being, my way of living. Yeah. And I was born just at the right time where it was coming out of the back alleyways and becoming prominent. And it just happened as I was starting. So it was timing or good luck.
That's awesome.
Yes.
So Miranda has or not a question, but she's got a comment. She says, "My grandma had an amazing intuition and was a very gifted astrologist. I have an antique teacup.
From your grandma? Wow, that's wonderful. How wonderful do you? I'm sure you'd be cherishing it. So I'm just going to interpret here. So your grandmother has amazing intuition, great, and was a very gifted astrologist. So astrology in a pure form is a science, the movement of stars and the effect on the movement of the stars on us. There are people who only do astrology by that way. And then I also know people who only do astrology by tuning into the person or doing a chart, using the chart to focus on and tune into the people. And then I've met people that do both. I'm not sure what your grandma would have been, but it must have been really pretty good. And it'd be lovely to touch that. I'd just like to share this. This is a silver bracelet. Okay. This was my great grandmother. Her name was Mary Ann Williamson. And she and my great grandfather, James Williamson, traveled through Scotland. James Williamson was a horse trader, maybe thief, horse trader, horse breeder. He bought and sold and trained horses as they traveled. So they traveled through Scotland in a covered wagon. I only found out a few years ago that Mary Ann Williamson, my great-great-grandmother, at night would tell fortunes by the campfire. And as they would travel through the countryside, people would come from far and wide to get a reading from her. This is my great-great-grandmother's bracelet. This was hers. And so I have it with me right now. I keep it with me when I work now. It's the first time in all my life that somebody in my family acknowledged that it ran in the family, and it was the first time I started getting invited to family dinners again. You know, that was always the weird kid.
I would imagine. I mean, there's
and I used to say stuff that that would piss people off, and I wouldn't know why. You know.
Yeah, no, I could imagine that, and it's there's definitely, and so as we start talking a little bit more about this, I think it's we got to bring up this topic where not everybody is gifted in doing this that claims that they are. Right. There are a lot of people out there, or maybe not a lot, but there are some that are in the psychic community and, the tarot cards and, whatever it is that they're practicing that aren't really legit.
Okay. So Yeah. So let's do it outright and say, okay, are there frauds in the business? Absolutely. But not that many. Most people that I know or that I've ever met that do this work, almost all of the people believe that they're making a contribution, that they're helping people kind. And most believe that they're using their skills. Most do. There are some that are liars and cheaters, but not very many. What often can get mistaken for fraudulent or fakery or charlatanism, what can be mistaken is poorly developed talents or people that just aren't any good at it, and recognizing that not everybody plays in the NBA. Not everybody's a star, not everybody's brilliant. So there are some people that aren't very good. There are some people that aren't very developed or haven't put that much time doing the work. And then there are some people that just don't have a lot of talent. And then sometimes you have an off day. So getting a reading, so what do they cost? $20, $30, $50, $100, $200. If somebody is lousy at doing their job or mediocre or having a bad day, that could seem like being a fraud. It's not, though. But it's not charlatanism. It's not fakery.
So how would somebody be able to maybe spot something like that out? Or is it just...
So now somebody that's a fraud, a charlatan, they're not looking to get $20 for a reading. Well, maybe the first one they are, or free even. So they're not looking to get $200. They're looking to get $10,000. So and they don't just go after the 10 grand. They will work somebody. So an old person who's not around their family very much, or somebody who's having a bad day or a bad time and they're going bankrupt and they're really in trouble and they see the flashing neon lights. Madame Zorro, solves all problems, heals all wounds, reunites all couples, $20. Come on in, right? Well, don't. So that now this person is a specialist. They specialize in vulnerable people. So the idea is they give them information, and anybody that knows anything about people, you can spend 5 minutes telling somebody things about them that are really general but are correct. And these people are really good at being a fake. So that they get $25. Then for an extra $50 to take the curse off you, they'll start burning candles. And then it just gets more and more and more and more until it's 20,000 or 30,000 or 50,000. That's how it works. That's where the frauds are. It's not the ones that are doing $25 readings or $5 palm readings that, on the corner. They're not the frauds. Mm-hmm. And usually the ones that are charging $300 or $500 aren't the frauds either.
That's interesting.
So it is a specialty. So because think about it. Charge $25. How can that be a fraud if it's a lousy reading?
Yeah, no, I get it. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking to myself, like, some of the things that I've heard, and because I've heard this question asked before, like sometimes you hear it on, sometimes they'll bring in a psychic on a news show or on a news network, whatever, for that particular segment. And I've heard this question, but a lot of times it's just asking general questions and watching for responses. So you're really trained in watching for responses in people.
Or self-trained.
Yeah,
All right. So, well, hang on here. So, great question. We can go in a slightly different direction. So, first of all, when I do a reading, it is not a dialogue. It's a monologue. So when I do a reading, I don't ask questions. And well, I know two things about because they book an appointment, I know their name and phone number or their email address or something. But when I do the reading, I ask them two questions. How old are you now? And what month is your next birthday? That's it. Shut up. I'm going to do your reading. And then I start off with, what's today? This is Monday, May 17th, 2021, psychic reading for Mary Smith by Robert Lindsy Milne in Toronto. Boom. And we start doing the reading. And that's the way it goes. And in the readings that I do, I look at people's lives from conception, although I don't see the details. I just see where the energy starts to completion. And often I don't necessarily actually see the completion. I just know when it is. And throughout the reading, it's about an hour monologue. Throughout the reading, I go forward and backward in time several times. Being psychic is, well, once upon a time, you used to talk about the sixth sense. Mm-hmm. Or extrasensory perception. So extrasensory perception or the sixth sense is you take all of your senses, touch, taste, smell, hear. What's the other? And another one. Okay, so touch, taste, smell, hear, and see. Now, all those senses used together create a sixth sense, another sense of awareness. And when I teach people when I was teaching classes, what I would say to them is become aware of what's obvious. Look at the person. Look at them. See what kind of person they are. Become aware of them. When you become aware of what's obvious, then more becomes obvious again. Your awareness spreads out. And when you become aware again of what's more obvious, it becomes more obvious again, and it spreads out till you get to the point where what you're talking about that seems obvious to you, to the other people, is not obvious at all. Okay. Example here. So, a big part of my career, I spent about 30 years traveling, radio shows, TV shows across the continents. And I would do open line shows. And once again, people would not ask questions. They would phone in, tell me their first name, where they were calling from, and then I would just start talking. That was no question. I would ask people to have one, write it down, but don't ask. And that's the way it goes. So, hi, my name is Mary. I'm calling from Manhattan. Mary, thank you very much. And then I would just start talking. And I would say whatever came into my mind. And 8 calls out of 10, what I talked about right off the top of my head was what that person was thinking about their questions. I would just simply start talking to them, and when I would be doing that, I would be saying what's obvious to me that was in my mind. And I would start spreading it out. And I would do things like, you're at home, would you put your hand over the table, move it to your right? Is that where the table got burned? Yes, that's where it happened. Thank you very much. And I used to do that. Still do, actually, when I do podcasts, when I do call-in shows, I still do that. Now, when I listen to the air checks later, so when I'm doing it, I'm thinking to myself, Robert, this is so bloody obvious. People are going to be listening and watching this, and they're going to be thinking, wow, that's so obvious, and anybody can do that. Next day or a week later, I'm listening to the air check, and I can remember what I was thinking at the time. And when I hear what I said, I realize That ain't obvious at all. It isn't even obvious to me right now when I was saying it. So become aware of what's obvious. Your awareness becomes greater and greater and greater until you're seeing things on levels that other people are not. So become aware of what's obvious. Oh, by the way, I have a magic wand too. I just like to hold it. I have ADHD, I have something in my hand.
Yeah, I think I do too.
Yeah.
So Ashton asks, how do you make your abilities better or find what your best ability is? Well,
first of all, practice your ass off. Practice. Every day, practice. If you're going to do this and you're going to be any good, it has to be a commitment. It just has to be. And it's something that you have to do every day. If you want to play around, that's fine. But if you're really going to do this is going to be your job, your career, your calling. You need to do it over and over and over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. How do you find the thing that you do best? Go with what you like the best.
That's simple enough.
Yeah. If you feel really turned on by using tarot cards, go for it. If you get really turned on using a crystal ball, hey, knock yourself out. If you want to use psychometry is when you hold an object in your hand and you feel the vibes from it. That's called psychometry. So that there's so many different ways, but that's all just causing you to be able to tune in. In essence, once you tune in, you're using the same skills, whether it's cards or crystal ball or palm or whatever. Once you're actually tuned in, you're using all the same skills that someone that doesn't use a medium would.
All right. So it's a good answer.
And I honestly have never actually used a medium. At the tea room, I had to, because in Canada at the time, it was against the law to do psychic readings for money, and it was called the Witchcraft Act. And it didn't get abolished until, hang on to your chair, man. It did not get abolished until July 2018.
What?
Yeah, no kidding. 2000, and it was called the Witchcraft Act. Section 326 of the Criminal Code stated, anyone who fraudulently, and doing that kind of stuff in those days, fraudulent, that's assumed. Okay, anyone who fraudulently, A, tells fortunes for a consideration, B, uses an occult or crafty science to accuse somebody of a crime, use an occult or crafty science to cause someone to be healed using that science, is guilty of a summary conviction of not more than $5,000 and not more than 1 year in jail. Those laws were brought into the law in the late 1800s, and it didn't come off the books until 2018. Incidentally, the same prime minister, Justin Trudeau, his father was a great prime minister. Justin, on the same year, legalized fortune telling and cannabis. And his father was famous for legalizing. His famous one when he was prime minister was he legalized homosexuality. And he said the government has no business in the bedrooms of the nation, and as long as people are adults, consenting adults, it's none of the government's business. So those two Trudeaus changed our social life in many, many different ways.
Interesting. Great information there. So my girlfriend Erica, she is asking, hello, what's the difference between a psychic, a palm reader, and tarot cards, etc.?
Great question. That's a good one. So let's do it. So a tarot card reader, that's what they do. So because of the deck that they use, the tarot tells a story, and each tarot card has symbols, and each tarot card represents something. And when you put the tarot cards down and start to do a spread, you can interpret those cards the way the books say. That's one way of doing it. Then there are some people that never read those books, put the tarot cards down, looked at the tarot cards, it reminded them of stuff, and they just did it. Some people do it both ways. Now that's tarot cards. And some people use that focus to get in touch with their intuition. Now, did Erica ask about, oh yes, I got my eyes on. Okay, so palm reading. Well, when doing palm readings, in truth, palm readings, it isn't just palm readings. When it really got started, it was something called chironomy. Chiro meaning hand, aronomy meaning study of. Chironomy is the study of the hand. So chironomists or palmists in the old days, they would read from the wrist all the way up to the top of the hands, and it would from the wrist upward, and also on both sides. And those and what they would do is take a palm print of the person's hand and study it with a microscope. No, a magnifying glass. Sorry, didn't need a microscope. Didn't go that deep. So it's just a magnifying glass, and they study that. So, and there are books about reading lines like that. No psychic ability, just that chironomy. Then there are people that know a little bit about the heart line, the head line, the lifeline, and stuff like that, and they just do it that way. And then there are some people that get palm prints, look at the hands, then they'll hold the person's hand. So now they're going to be using psychometry, some knowledge, and then their instincts. Being psychic. Well, being psychic. It's spelled P-S-Y-C-H-I-C, by the way. If you look at that word, psychic, it comes from the Greek root psyche. Psyche means mind, soul, or self. If you've got a mind, a soul, or a self, and I think just a lot of people have those three together. And if you have that three together, you're psychic when you use it. So we're all psychic. We all have those instincts and those intuitions. So it's just the way someone is comfortable with giving the information. When I have students come to me and they're using a medium, I encourage them to push the medium away and learn how to do readings without it.
Huh. That's interesting. I mean, all of this stuff is really interesting because I think that, we're all energy, and I've experienced the things that you're talking about with being able to think about something, and then all of a sudden, something pops up that ends up helping me in some way, shape, or form. And there's no other explanation other than it's like, damn, I was really thinking about that. So I'm outputting so much energy into it that, something came back. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that.
Well, I also believe that what you give out comes back. I believe that. I believe what you focus on is returned. And so I believe also that just about anybody if they want to put the effort in, can do traditional miracles too.
Well, I mean,
you can be taught to. You can, pardon?
Isn't that with everything though? I mean,
absolutely. With everything, we can. If you believe you can do it, you can do it. The only thing is to start off doing it a little bit, doing small things, and build up your confidence.
So I have a question here. It says, is the future what must be or what can be?
Sounds like Scrooge speaking to the ghost of Christmas future, just as Scrooge, the spirit of Christmas future is telling Scrooge what's going to happen to him. Scrooge says, tell me, spirit, is this what must happen or what can happen? And then, you hear this weird sound, and then Scrooge wakes up or starts seeing the visions. So free choice and free will always comes into things. We always have free choice and free will. There are very few things in life that are destined. Very few things. Some. Now, when something's destined, it cannot be changed. So when something's destined and it cannot be changed, most often it cannot be seen. Because when we see something, we can change it. So when I give information to somebody about what I see as the future, I tell them this is how I see it. And if you do this, and this is what's going to happen. And I always give the information, and I leave it open-ended so that they know they can change it. Because as soon as I say, you're going to do this, they can then say to themselves, no, I'm not, and they'll do something else. So we always have free choice and free will. There was one time, it was just after the Calgary Winter Olympics, and this young woman came to me for a reading. It was in Toronto. And I did this beautiful reading for her. I remember some of the things I said. She rode her bike up to my office, and I just thought it was a fabulous reading. I really dug meeting this young woman. She was a producer, by the way, for the CTV Sports network, and she was an announcer at the games. And anyway, I talked about this great future that she had, and it was really wonderful. Gave her reading. I got my money. She goes out, gets on her bike, and rides away. The very next night, I'm watching the 11 o'clock news. It's the national news, and 11 o'clock news is national here in Canada. And the CTV newscaster's name at the time was Lloyd Robertson. He was reading an obituary. And then there was a picture of the very woman that had come to me the day before for a reading. And it seems like on her way home from her reading, when she was riding her bike, she got hit by a trolley car. We call them streetcars in Toronto. And she got hit by a streetcar and got killed on her way home after leaving me. And I thought to myself, how could I have missed that? And I struggled with that for a very, very long time. You know, like, if you're so bloody good, how come you didn't see that? I didn't have to have anybody saying that to me. Right after that happened, I stopped doing readings for a couple of weeks. Just, how could I have missed that? What's wrong with me? And then one of my teachers, said, Robert, destiny cannot be changed. And often, because it cannot be changed, it cannot be seen. If you would have told her, don't ride your bike, she would have avoided that destiny. And that's the only way I can handle it. That's the only way I can explain it.
So you think things are preordained? I
didn't say that. I said most things are free choice and free will and happenstance. A few things are destined. Mm-hmm. Not very many. Very, very few things are actually destined. Most things are free choice. Okay. But sometimes there are things that are destined, and you can't usually see that because it can be changed.
Fair enough.
Yeah, right. And I didn't mean to sound snotty when I said I didn't mean to say that. Sorry if it came across snotty. I didn't mean
Oh my goodness. You know what? I take so much offense to just how you just reacted.
Oh, okay, good. I was just saying that. It wasn't quite as nice as I wasn't being snotty.
I'm so offended.
Oh, good. I'm
Robert.
Glad. Good.
You're not coming back on the show, Robert.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is there something I can do? Please.
But you know how you can make it right.
And talk about a new car you're getting? Sure, okay.
Yeah, definitely not one of those. Don't need one unless I get hired by a company that gives me one.
What I said is we could talk about the new car that you're getting. Instead of ruling it out, you could open your mind to the possibility.
I have cars that I need to get rid of.
Well, once again, you're telling me why. So if you were doing a reading, if I was doing a reading for you and you continued speaking like that, I would stop the reading and say, I'm sorry, I can't do a reading for you.
Really?
Absolutely. And one of the reasons is you decided that no matter what I will say, you will not do that. You said this is, no, it's not wrong. That you've just said this is what it is and nothing's going to change it. Oh, okay, well, fine. Next. Right.
Well, possibly.
Right. So, and I don't argue. I don't care. I don't argue. The other thing is negative feedback inhibits creativity, not creativity. So giving negative feedback shuts down the creative flow.
So how?
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying, if you're getting a reading, you just be quiet.
Well, when you get readings from me, you do. Well, because if you interrupt me, if you interrupt me, what happens is when I'm tuning into somebody, what I'm saying isn't necessarily what I'm thinking about. What I'm saying is often I've already processed and is being delivered. What I'm thinking about is what I'm going to be saying next, what I've already said, what I'm about to say, and maybe something what I'm doing later on that day as well. So my mind is spread out in many areas all at the same time. So if you interrupt that flow, I have to stop and get reconnected again. And sometimes I can't. And what often happens, so interrupting me would be like getting disconnected from the internet. You lose the connection. That's what happens.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I would be interested in having you come back on and doing a reading live and seeing how that transpires. And I promise I won't talk, and I won't be negative.
Well, it became your insistence that you weren't going to do it. You became insistent that no matter what I said, it wasn't going to happen, and you weren't interested. You weren't open to any other like what happens if you won a door prize? What happens if you won a lotto? What happens if you find the dream car? There can be like a million reasons why. What happens if you inherit one? There could be a million reasons why. Instead of saying, well, no, I'm not looking for a car. I've got too many already. I got to get rid of some. All that does is saying, well, I'm not going to allow the information that I've just received. I'm not going to allow it to happen. Okay, next.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, and when you're thinking that way, there's nothing that I can do to get you to change your mind in that moment and see it. You were just, this is it. Yeah, but how about no? I got too many already. Oh, okay. Well, you win. That's okay. Well, you win because if I would have continued, it would have also closed your mind even more to the possibility. Because I also believe that most of us, even though we don't realize it, are really good at manifesting things. And so people that are in this terrible relationship, been together for 35 years, and it's terrible. And all they do is talk about how awful it is, all the time. Guess what you're doing? You're creating it. You're creating that dysfunction. You're manifesting it. So we're always manifesting things. Some do it positively, some do it negatively. And when you're in a situation and something that's happening over and over and over again, ask yourself, what do I think about now? What's the biggest thing on my mind? What's the most intense thing? Dollars to donuts, it's the negative thing that that you've been focusing, whether it be your relationship or your job or your sore foot or the jerk that lives across the road or any one of those things. Ask yourself, what do you think? What are you concentrating on? And you'll find out that's what you've been doing. And if you change what you focus on, then your environment will change too, and it'll change fast.
That's a great point. I often say that as well. You know, it's if you see it and dream it, you can be it.
The only reason we can't do something is because we absolutely believe we cannot. So check this one out, Sean. The only reason you can't fly, the only reason is because you absolutely believe 100% you can't. Now, don't go trying to prove that you can, unless it's like, you know, maybe off a soapbox or something. Don't be jumping out like big windows to prove you can fly. The only reason you can't walk through a wall, is because you absolutely believe you can. So when you're trying to do miracles or do things, bring it down to the level that you believe you can do. So when I'm doing readings for people and I give them information, I make sure that I give them the information in the boundaries of what they can believe. So if I say to somebody, okay, by the way, in the next 4 years from now, you're going to make like $900,000. Well, if that person absolutely believes they have no chance of doing that, they're not going to do it. So what I would do is I would say to them, you know, over the next 4 years, your income is going to increase because of different work and, you know, and investment stuff. And you're going to be increasing about 25% over the next 3-4 years. Well, they can believe that. Then what I'll say, and if you keep doing that, and at this time it's probably going to be about $2 million. So what I do first is I tell them something in the framework of what they can believe. And when they believe that, then I tell them what I really say. I take it the next step so that it doesn't, so that they don't eliminate that from their path. So that's how I do things. And in some, and also the way I do my readings these days is when someone comes to me, it's no big secret. Usually when someone comes to me, they're in trouble. You know, like people usually don't go out and, you know, and see a psychic like me and, you know, pay a couple of $100 for an hour. They don't usually do it for entertainment. You know, $10 at the Cozy, well, it was $2 then. $2 at the Cosy Tea Rooms at entertainment. $200 an hour is not. They're here for a reason. So when they come to me, they've got issues, usually a problem or a big problem. What I do, remember I said at the beginning. I often see someone's life from conception to the ending of their life, to their completion. When I'm doing a reading and someone's really having a shitty time, what I do is I talk about the longevity of their life, and then I look forward into the future, say like when they're 80. And I look backward through their eyes to where they are right now. And I describe to them how they solved the problem, how at 80, what they think about the way they solved the problem that they're going through right now, and how they solved it. And it's so healing for people because the first thing they find out is that they've solved it. And then they go away with the ability to solve it. And that's one of the techniques I use, looking into the future and telling people how they feel about what they're going through right now, and how they've dealt with it is a very comforting thing. The other thing I do when I'm doing readings is I immediately start off with showing people how safe they are right now in the moment, how safe their life how safe their life is, and I focus on their strong points first, and then get to the vulnerabilities, and that's also how I do it.
Well, that's awesome, man. And I like I said, I think it's really interesting. And I would, if you want to schedule something and maybe set that up at a later time, I
Great.
definitely,
Michelle is the one. Michelle, my publicist, she'll book that for me. I'll tell her to get in touch with you if you want to have me. Great.
and,
Yes.
oh yeah, there goes Miranda. She said, how do you schedule a reading with you on your
Yeah.
website?
So yeah, go to my website, send me a link, and I'll respond really quickly. So and my website is robertlindsymilne.com. So it's my name, robertlindsymilne.com.
That's right
And
there on
that's
the
it.
front there.
That's correct. And there's a link that you can send me your information, your email, and I'll get right to you.
Awesome. Well, there you go. And Miranda is, I don't know if I mentioned this before, Miranda is my vice president of my nonprofit called the Nowhere to Go But Up Project.
Oh, yes. So if there is anything that I can do that would help promote your charity, if there's anything that I can contribute, my time, readings, if you wanted to raffle off one of my readings as a gift, if there's anything that I can do, or maybe on a show that you'd book me, I could do some calls for people, and maybe they could send in $10 or $20 and it go to your charity. I would be honored if you would allow me to do that.
No, absolutely, and that's something that we'll talk about in the future on in some of our board meetings, and when we get into fundraising and the different things that we can do for it. But yeah, definitely, and I appreciate
Please consider
that.
me. Yeah, it would be a privilege to do so.
Awesome, appreciate it. Anything else that you can think of? Otherwise, we're just going to wrap this up.
Well, I can talk for the rest of the night. I've only been doing this for 56 years. So I just got the odd story or two. Next time I come back, we can talk about my connection with the KGB agent and the RCMP security, and talk to you about that one.
Have you ever been remote viewing? Have you ever been
Well, no, I don't remote view, but I do. So there was no such thing as remote viewing when I started. There was no such thing as that. There was no such thing as telephone readings when I started. There was no such thing of professional psychics that had an office when I started. You either worked in your, the tea leaves at your kitchen sink, or you worked at a tea room, and the tea room gets more than half the money. So I forget the question because I went off on a tangent. Sorry, man. What was that?
Remote viewing.
Yes. Now, what I was saying earlier, I used to practice doing telephone reading, did it for almost a year, practicing doing telephone readings for strangers as I was learning to do psychic shows. And I started practicing on Tim Weisbrook's show, on one of Michelle's shows that she's producer of. I was on last June, and I took a call from a guy, and this is what I said. And I said to him, "Okay, so so you're at your home now?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you live actually in a house or an apartment?" He said, "Well, like an apartment type building." And I said, like a smaller one, a small apartment building. And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Now, if you stand at the front of the building, facing it, the front, on the left-hand side, at the very top and halfway down the left-hand side, it looks like there's been some water damage, or there is damage. There is being damaged right now, and you need to get that looked at." And the guy said to me, "I don't know how you did that, but man, that's right on. Our roof caved in like yesterday from a water leak, from a huge storm or something, and our roof gave in." And it was exactly where I said. Now, was that remote viewing? That's not the way those people do it, but it's the way I do it. And there have been times where I've looked for lost people and have come up with them, and I've seen it, but not the way they do it. Mm. Okay. Well, I couldn't read and write. Like I didn't learn to read and write, literally read and write until I was about 19 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't have any. I had very little literacy skills, and my my education was like 2/3 of a semester in grade 9. That was my that's my education. So I do still have some. That's why at the beginning of this, before we went on today, when it wasn't quite set up, I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't read. It brought me back to those days when I was illiterate.
Yeah. Well, we got through it,
We did. Well, I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on the show and giving me your time. And I definitely, I'll reach back out to you at some point, or to Michelle.
I'm ready. I'd love to. I love your show. I'm really impressed. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the compliment. I appreciate it, because you've probably been on plenty of shows, and to hear that you feel that way about this one, that means a lot.
What you have done in your life is spectacular. Very few people do and come out of what you came out of and did what you've done. Congratulations. I'm speechless. What you are a hero. The things that you do because you got hurt, you help so many others.
Thanks.
Good on you, man.
And I hope so. That's the point. Well, at least that's what it started as.
That's right. Well, and way to go. I'm impressed. Like I'll come back anytime.
All right, cool, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. So, everybody, Robert Lindsy Milne, you can catch him on at his website. Yep. All the direct links are going to be available in the description. Miranda said she sent the email. And you're really great, Sean. Well, I appreciate that, Miranda, and you're great too. That's why you're a part of you're part of the nonprofit and on the board, because we are going to do some great things together. So, all right. See you. Hold on for a second. I'll pull you into the green room, and I'll be right with you in just a moment. Well, there you go. Great show. I definitely appreciated Robert coming on and talking to us about his abilities and psychic abilities and all that stuff. It's really interesting. Where are we at here? So tomorrow, the next broadcast is going to be at 4 p.m. and I'll be talking with Tasha Odenui, and she's a justice impacted woman who both of her brothers are in prison. And if I'm not mistaken, and I was looking for confirmation because I met her in a clubhouse room, and I believe that one of her brothers killed the other one, and that one's in prison now. So she's going to talk about her trauma in her book, and she wrote a book and an autobiography on this. And then the next one after that will be on the 19th, which is Wednesday, and it's going to be an early one. It's 8 a.m. and Pacific time. And that one is going to be with Joel Hirschhorn, who is a researcher and has wrote a book called The Pandemic Blunder. And it has a lot of information and data that's been collected by a bunch of different medical professionals. And he kind of crunches this data and comes up with some information and some different stuff about the vaccine and everything else. And so we're going to have him on so he can give his perspective and talk about his book. Other than that, that's it. We're here. I'm actually really tired. I got hooked on a Peacock TV series called Yellowstone with Kevin Costner. Now I'm going to tell you what, I have not gotten sucked into a show like this since Breaking Bad. Or Ozarks. Ozarks was the one that got me sucked in. Now, this is a great show. If you haven't seen it and you don't have Peacock TV, I would definitely check it out. At least try the free preview and go look at that show. It's a really good one. And Miranda, I'm hooked on A Handmaid's Tale. We're all hooked on something. All right, guys. Thank you for listening to the show. Thanks you for participating in the comments. And thank you to my guests for today. There were 3 of them. I really appreciate everything. And as always, keep it 100. Stay true to yourself, because everything else is just noise.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at Nowhere to Go But Up Now. On Twitter at But Up Now. On the YouTube channel at Nowhere to Go But Up Podcast. See you next time.